Hello everyone, my name's Angie Hilton, and on behalf of Geelong's Regional Libraries, I'd like to welcome you officially to the Library's 5th virtual author event this afternoon. So thanks so much for joining us. I hope you're all doing really well out there. I think we're all starting to adjust a little bit a few weeks in. Now, the Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar original owners of this land on which our library services operate. We pay respect to Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and celebrate First Nations people of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. Now today I have the great pleasure of introducing Mr. Marcus Riley. Marcus, are you above me there on the screen?
I am. Hi, Angie.
Hi. Now, Marcus is the author of Booming, a life-changing philosophy for aging well. Marcus is the immediate past chair and current director of the Global Aging Network and a member of the steering committee for the Global Alliance of the Rights of Older People. Marcus is also CEO of Ballycara, a charitable organisation and public benevolent institution which provides accommodation, health and care services for older people, as well as a range of support and advisory functions to service-based industries. From an early age, Marcus has always had a passion for older people and an interest in aged services. Marcus studied business management and has worked in the aged care industry for the past 2 decades, providing leadership and influence on local, national and global levels. Thank you for joining us, Marcus. How are you doing?
Very well, Angie. Thanks so much for being a part of the conversation this afternoon, and hello to all the participants.
So good to have you. Now, I believe you're up in sunny Brisbane.
I am, yes. We've been really battling away with a beautiful day of 30 degrees and blue skies here. So it's a lovely time of year and good for people to be outside and getting some exercise.
Us Victorians don't want to hear too much about that beautiful sunshine. However, it's pretty nice here today, I must admit.
I certainly love Victoria, so I won't be rubbing it in about the climate much more than we have already.
Now, I believe you have 3 little ones?
I do, yes. I have a boy 13 and 2 girls nearly 11 and nearly 9, they'd like me to say.
Wow. So they're all doing the schooling from home?
They are. I have the good fortune of being married to a primary school teacher, so I'm there as a support role mainly, and it's been interesting so far, but it's been a bit of fun as well, and everyone's adapting as we have to at the moment. So yeah, it's all new experiences, and I think as long as you can have a laugh along the way, then you can keep your head above water with it all.
I think that's exactly right, to find the joy within the chaos, isn't it?
That's right. I must admit, I've quite enjoyed having extra time at home with the family. We haven't had to go places on the weekend with the kids' normal extracurricular activities and different things. So whilst it's sad that they haven't got those activities at the moment, it's been nice just to have that time at home with the family and doing different things around the place, which I'm sure we'll get tired of at some stage soon, but it's been nice the last few weekends.
It has been nice, and I don't know about you, but I feel like we're just starting to relax into it a little bit more as the weeks go on, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Easter weekend was a bit of a milestone for everyone, that there was quite a lead up to that break or that weekend, and then last week and last weekend seemed to be a bit more comfortable for everyone, and again I think people have adjusted and come to terms with things to a certain degree at least.
Absolutely. Now, we're really excited about your presentation. We've got lots of people that are curious to know your expert thoughts on ageing.
Great.
Now, your presentation for us tonight will be followed by a discussion, so everyone can send in questions that might pop up. You might even want to have a little notepad and pen so you can write those questions down so you don't forget to ask Marcus at the end. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. You can participate in this live webinar by clicking on the Q&A button and typing your question or comment. You may need to touch your screen to see the Q&A and chat functions if you are using an iPad or iPhone when you're joining us today. We'll also be running a couple of audience polls during the event, so keep an eye out for those. They'll just pop up on your screen and they're very easy to participate in. Now, Marcus, were you going to get into the polls straight away, or did you want to start your presentation?
I might just kick things off briefly, Angie, and then introduce the first poll very shortly.
Absolutely. So take it away, Marcus. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Angie. And thanks everyone who has joined. Really appreciate you making the time to be a part of our conversation this afternoon. I want to start by sharing with you my personal belief that I've formed over the last 25 years with my involvement in the area of ageing. And I'm just going to share a slide with you, which I'll do throughout the presentation this afternoon. And it should come up here. So this is my very firm belief that we all have the potential to age successfully, or as I like to call it, to boom. That we all have that potential, irrespective of our health circumstances, irrespective of our social circumstances, that we all have that potential to age successfully. And over the course of our discussion this afternoon, I will share with you the reasons why I have formed that belief and why I hold that belief very firmly. I also want to share with you some threats to our booming, some things that we need to be understanding and aware of as we look at our ageing journey. I do want to absolutely share with you what I believe are the secrets to ageing successfully. Perhaps also share some thoughts about the current circumstances in regards to the COVID-19 situation, and also to talk a little bit about how we think about our future and how we contemplate our later life. So, so with that, again, I thank everyone for joining and being a part of this conversation. Obviously, it's always great if we can be together and be in person, but this is the next best thing, to be connected through technology. And I guess it's a sign of the way each of us are adapting to the current circumstances and creating new ways to do the things we would otherwise normally like to do in an original way. So again, thanks for making the time, and thanks to the team at the Geelong Library for facilitating the event this afternoon. I much appreciate the effort in making this happen. Now, as Angie mentioned, we have a couple of poll questions throughout our conversation this afternoon. And the first one is, how do you feel about your increased longevity? And that poll question is really recognising the fact that most of us will certainly live a late life. So how do you feel about your increased longevity? And there's 4 options for you to choose from to answer this question. Answer A is that you are excited. Answer B is I'm okay with it. Answer C is I'm concerned. Answer D is don't really think about it. So over the course of the next few minutes, perhaps you could poll your answer to that question. Please be honest, and whatever you think about in regards to, or how you feel about your increased longevity, it'd be great to share your thoughts, and we can have a look at those results as the webinar proceeds during the course of the afternoon. So moving on then, in terms of our successful ageing and the reality, or the question that I like to normally pose to people in these sort of forums, and actually ask people to share with each other, but I won't get you to share it online now, but to think about what age you are. And normally, practically every time when we ask someone that question, the response is a number. And whether that number is accurate or not is a different thing, but certainly most people immediately respond with a number when they're asked the question, what age you are. And that's because as a society, we are absolutely fixated on the chronological age. And obviously the chronological age is the number of days, the number of years lived. And as a society, we are absolutely fixated on that chronological age. We base a lot of our stereotypes on the chronological age. We base a lot of our expectations on what age we are, how many years we've lived. And we also perhaps inhibit our thinking based on what my or another person's age number might be. But again, I want to share with you a slide that points to the fact that there are in fact 3 forms of age, not just the chronological age. And let's get this up on the screen for everyone. So, as I said, there are 3 forms of age. The chronological age I just spoke about. But there's also the biological age, which is how our body feels. And the third one is our psychological age, which is obviously our emotional and mental well-being. Obviously, out of those three forms of age, one of them we have no control over. And that, of course, is our chronological age. We cannot influence or control how many days or how many years we have lived. But we can influence how our body feels. We can influence how our mind and emotions are travelling. And the good news is that it's those two forms of age which actually have a greater influence as to how we age and how we live through our later life, what our health and well-being is like as we progress through our longevity, through our aging journey. And in terms of our biological age, we've obviously learnt more and more over the years in terms of how we can maintain our physical health, things that we can do both in a preventative sense, but also in a restorative sense to return to some of the capacities that we had or to improve some of the ailments that we may have had. Also managing chronic conditions that we might have. So again, it's being aware of the ability for us to control, to influence our physical health, our physical well-being. And similarly with our psychological age, again, we are learning more and more as time goes on in terms of how we can have a positive influence in terms of our emotional well-being, in terms of our mental health. And rightly so, it's starting to be given more priority across society too. But it's important to understand the influence, again, looking after our psychological age can have on our health and well-being as we get older. So we can do things to support and nurture our emotional well-being. We can do things to support our mental health, be they preventative, so we can be taking measures in a proactive sense to eliminate the threat of some of those mental health problems or challenges with our emotional well-being. And similarly, we can also help repair some damage that might have been done, or that we can manage circumstances or situations that we might find ourselves in as we progress through life. So the three forms of age that I've just been through are the first reason why I have that belief that we all have the potential to age successfully. That irrespective of our chronological age, we can influence how our body feels, we can influence how our mind feels as we get older. So that's the first reason why I believe we all have the potential to age successfully. The second question I would perhaps like you to contemplate as I'm talking is, what do you envisage, what do you picture successful aging looks like for you? And if we took a poll on this question, we'd get a range of different answers, as we should, because what I want for my successful aging will look different to what Angie wants and to what other people want. It'll be different from one person to another, as it should, because we are all different. We have different priorities, we want different things, we're at different stages of our life, we're in different circumstances. So the other way of looking at that is successful aging is self-defined, or our booming is self-defined. It's what I want, it's what I need. So for that reason, I believe it is attainable for us. The fact that successful aging is self-defined. So that's the second reason why I believe firmly that we all have the potential to age successfully, irrespective of our health or social circumstances. No matter what point of my life I am at, no matter what circumstances I might find myself in, whatever the future might look like for me, no matter how long the future might be or how short it might be, it's my aging, it's my future, and it's self-defined. I define what successful aging is for me. And again, that's going to be based on your personal priorities, your personal circumstances. So it's not for me or for anybody else to prescribe to you what successful aging looks like for you. It's for you to define. And because it is defined by you, you can attain it, you can pursue it. So they're the two reasons, the two key reasons why I've formed and hold this firm belief that we all have the potential to age successfully. And flowing on from that is another belief that we have a choice when it comes to our increased longevity. We hear a lot about the aging of our population, and the majority of people are going to get older, and it's often spoken about in a negative sense, that we've got to prepare for this grey tsunami, or we're going to have all these catastrophic consequences because so many people in the world are going to be of an older age. In fact, our longevity, our increased longevity, and the fact that most of us will live a lot longer is one of humanity's greatest triumphs, if not its greatest. And it should be celebrated, yet it's spoken about in very negative terms. And I'll come back to that negativity shortly. But it is there for us to recognise on an individual basis that most of us will live well into our late 80s and beyond. So if we contemplate that for a moment, we will recognise that we will have more of our adult life to live after our 50th birthday than before it. And if we think then about all the things we do and achieve in life between 18 and 50, careers, marriages, families, perhaps multiples of all of those things, adventures and experiences. If we think of what we achieve in that window of time, and then we contemplate that beyond 50, we have a longer period of time to live, then we start to realise that there is a choice about that longevity. A choice as to whether we grab hold of that later life and really embrace it and get what we want from it, plan for it, or whether we essentially slowly decline and wither away and succumb to the negativity and not have control over the ensuing decades of our later life. So when I come to talk in a moment about the threats to our booming or our successful ageing and the ways in which we can age successfully, we need to start, I believe, by understanding that it is a choice for us individually in terms of how we look at our later life, how we look at our ageing journey, whether we want to grab hold of it, whether we want to seize the opportunity that longevity does provide to us, or whether we want to succumb and wither away in accordance with the stereotypes that go along with getting older. So before getting to the secrets or the reasons how we can age successfully, I want to identify the threats to our booming. And it's important to do that because obviously there are a number of risks as we get older. There are some things that can affect the way we age and our health and well-being as we get older. So I'm just going to add another slide here. So these are the key threats to our booming or to our successful ageing. The first one is negativity. And when we talk about negativity, that relates to our own personal mindset, but also the negativity of others. And that certainly relates to ageism, which unfortunately permeates across all areas of our society. And I would argue that ageism is in fact the last form of acceptable prejudice in our society. We've seen in past years other forms of prejudice called out, things like racism and sexism and homophobia. I don't profess that they've all been solved, but they have been called out. Ageism has not really been called out yet. However, it is so common across our society, across all communities. It's almost a cultural or a casual ageism that often we don't recognise it's happening. It can happen, what certainly happens in workplaces, in other community environments. It happens in families. It's the conversation or the rejection, it's the casual ignoring or the casual exclusion of someone, be it in our family, be it in our workplace, be it a neighbour. It happens in the public sphere as well. And the flow-on effect of that ageism and that negative stereotyping about getting older is that it impacts on people's individual self-belief, their perception of themselves, and their view of their own ageing. And so people start to believe that they're of less value, that they should be withdrawing from doing certain things, that they should start to slow down, start to stop, start to not participate. And that's a significant threat to our successful ageing, to our booming. The second threat is the loss of control. And again, if you ask most people what their major fears were about getting older, loss of control is certainly very high on the list. And that can be the fear about other people making decisions for us as we get older and as certain circumstances might evolve in our life. It might be having less choice, less options, less choice about where we live, about who we associate with, about who we access services and support from if we need that later in our life. So that loss of control is certainly a key concern and a key threat to our booming. The third one is isolation. And isolation is a great threat to our health and well-being as we get older. And it obviously talks to the risk of people becoming disconnected, of becoming, whether it be in their own home or a particular environment they're living in, that people become cut off, disconnected and lonely. And the impact of loneliness and isolation, again, is just starting to become properly realised now, to the extent where 2 years ago in the United Kingdom, they appointed a Minister for Loneliness for the first time in their government, because they were starting to understand the impact, the risk associated with people being isolated at home, becoming lonely, the impact on mental health, physical health, that sense of disconnection. So those key threats are things that we need to be really aware of, because they do create the risk in terms of our health and well-being, in terms of our control, in terms of the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at our later life. The good news is, though, that there are 3 silver bullets for those 3 threats to our booming. And if you're all ready, I will share with you the 3 secrets for successful ageing, at least according to Marcus Riley. And again, these beliefs I have and the views I've formed through the benefit I've had of working with older people and observing people for over 25 years in terms of how some people have aged successfully, why they have, and similarly why some people perhaps haven't aged as positively, and the reasons for that as well. So the 3 secrets to successful ageing are positivity, planning, and purpose. And again, I'll share these with you on the screen, because they are clear to follow. So positivity is clearly the way to address negativity. The negativity that we might have ourselves and the negativity that surrounds us in society. So positivity is not necessarily about skipping down the street each day with a gleeful smile on our face. Although if you'd like to do that, that's perfectly appropriate for you to do so. But when I talk about positivity, it's really about our daily outlook, about an underpinning self-belief in terms of how we pursue our later life, about having a willingness to say yes to different opportunities, to having a positive outlook in terms of our ability to overcome setbacks that will inevitably happen in life. And we know that they're going to occur, whether it's our own health situation, whether it's a loss of loved ones. We are going to have setbacks in our life, particularly as we enjoy longer lives. But having a positive mindset, having a positive approach each day is what will enable us to overcome those setbacks and to keep looking to the future and to keep being excited and optimistic about what lies ahead for us. It's about having that open mind. And again, it doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen for us overnight. It's about having a daily approach to that and maintaining that positive outlook. The second one is planning. And planning is the secret to retaining control as we get older. And it's never too early or too late to be planning. And by that I mean, if you're independent, healthy, young, 50 or 40-year-old or 60-year-old, it's never too early to be planning for your decades of life to come. Conversely, you might be 98 years old and 2 weeks to live. Those 2 weeks are still your 2 weeks and your future to be planning for and to be having control over. So we need our plans to be made and also to be adaptable. So to be contemplating where we want to be, the things we want to be doing, the relationships that are important to us, the things that are important in our life, our priorities, and incorporate those into our planning as we contemplate our future. And again, those plans need to be adaptable. We need to update them because things will change. Our priorities might change, our passions might change, our circumstances might change. And at times you might want to take advice in as far as those planning considerations are concerned, whether it's advice on our financial capacities, about legal advice, Those sorts of inputs are valuable, but at the same time, it's got to be your plan. So we don't want other people dictating to us what our plan should be for later life. They are our plans to design and shape our later life. We want to communicate with people about them so that our family and other important people in our life know what we're wanting to do, where we want to be, and they can then support those plans as time goes on. But at all times, it's about owning those plans so that you're retaining control. And the other great advantage of planning ahead is it maximises our choices and our options. If it's about where we want to live or about what we want to be doing by way of activities and pastimes and different pursuits, about services we want, the more we plan ahead, the more we maximise our options and choices for those certain aspects of our life. Again, about keeping control. The third one is purpose. And purpose is really, again, the secret to avoiding isolation. Purpose is about staying engaged with life. So that is understanding what's important to us, what roles or the things that we do that do give us that sense of purpose, that sense of self-worth. For some, it might be the roles they play in their family, which provide that sense of purpose. For others, it's about the importance of work and continuing to work for as long as they can, or for staying involved in a business they might have developed over time. It might be a volunteering or other roles we perform in the community. Again, it comes back to the individual in terms of that sense of purpose. So it's understanding what is important to me, what fuels that sense of purpose, that sense of self-worth, what drives that engagement for me. And that engagement, that sense of purpose is hugely important. And it's the way, as I said, to overcome that risk of isolation, that risk of being disconnected. And of course, in these current circumstances, we're having to be creative as far as how we pursue ways of being connected, of staying engaged and fueling that sense of purpose. And it's interesting in thinking about that positive ageing pursuit and the ingredients to that successful ageing. And I want to introduce you to someone who, to me, has been a shining example of positivity, of planning and of purpose. This is Brenda, who was my wife's grandmother. And Brenda, in her mid to late 80s, had a choice to make because of some key setbacks that happened in her life. She and her husband, Marty, lived in a property a couple of hours west of Brisbane, and they had animals and a variety of things on the property. And then her husband, Marty, husband of over 60 years, passed away, and her youngest of 5 children also suddenly died in her early 50s due to a brain tumour. So Brenda had had these huge personal setbacks in what was already her late life. And she had a choice to make as to whether she stayed on the property or whether she moved and went to somewhere closer to where the rest of her family lived. And at the time, most of her family, or in fact all her family, were really encouraging her to move into Brisbane, into a smaller place and closer to the rest of her children and other relatives. But Brenda made a different choice, and she decided she would stay on the property and run it herself, bearing in mind that her husband had taken care of the maintenance of the property, all the financial affairs, all the administration of the property for all the previous years they'd been there. But Brenda was determined that she would stay there and continue to be a part of her community in that area. Over the next 12 to 15 years, Brenda absolutely thrived on that property. She had to learn a whole range of new things, particularly in terms of the financial and administrative affairs and how to maintain the property, but that she did. And over that period of time, she did it all herself. She would ride the ride-on mower to maintain the grass. She would tend to the horses. She would set traps to catch the foxes. She would be doing all manner of things on that property, as well as being super involved in her local community. She was very connected and performed a number of different roles with community groups and different organisations, to the extent where that after she did pass away, the local council named a park in her honour. And she was just this shining example of thriving in later life, irrespective of different circumstances that she was confronted with. And if you ask Brenda what her secret to her successful ageing was, she would say an egg a day and a house with stairs. But I know there was much more to it than that. And really, it was about her positive mindset, which was a daily outlook. She was pragmatic and realistic, but she was positive. She believed in herself. And I know that she had times when she doubted whether she could do certain things, but she persevered through those and maintained that positive outlook. Secondly, she planned. She knew she had to learn new things. She knew she had to manage things in a systematic and a regulated way. So she planned really effectively. And thirdly, she was absolutely engaged. As I said before, she was very connected. She had a great sense of purpose because of that engagement, because of the different roles that she played. And on her 90th birthday, and then each birthday after her 90th, she would have a big party for all the family at her property west of Brisbane. And this is an image of her arriving at her 95th birthday party on the back of a Harley Davidson. And to this day, she remains a great inspiration to me and others, including my colleagues who know Brenda's story and, of course, her wider family and friends. And it brings us now to our second poll question for this afternoon. And the second poll question is, do you know what gives you purpose? And there's three options for this question. So again, the question is, do you know what gives you purpose? Option A is definitely, and I base my life around it. Option B is yes, but it's hard to maintain it sometimes. Or option C is not really. So again, that question is, do you know what gives you purpose? A, definitely, and I base my life around it. B, yes, but hard to maintain it sometimes. Or C, not really. So we will move on now with some more of the presentation. And folks, as you'd be aware, we will have questions shortly. So please be considering anything you might want to ask, and we can get to those questions with Angie and myself very shortly. So moving on from Brenda, there's a couple of things to be really mindful of in terms of how we try and be positive, how we try and maintain a sense of purpose, and how we plan effectively. And that's really about A, increasing our self-knowledge, and B, to be more future thinking. So in regards to our self-knowledge, it's about really understanding who we are, what drives us, what's important to us. And of course, to do that, we need to reflect and look back in terms of what has been our life, what's been important to me in the past, how have I lived my life, and what has got me to this stage. And then it's casting our eye forward in terms of the future and looking at what are the things we want to be doing, what are the things that are going to be important to me. And there's some exercises we can do to help develop our self-knowledge and also to help foster our future thinking. And the first one of those is to reflect on our passions. So what are the things that really drive us? What are the things that are really important to us? The second one is to be reflecting on our priorities. So what are the relationships that are important to me? Is it important to me where I live in terms of location and the type of environment? Is it important to me certain things that I want to be doing and have access to certain environments or to certain people, certain friends, certain groups? And as we mentioned before, identifying what our purpose is. So investing time to reflect on those things really helps increase our self-knowledge, our knowledge about who we are. And that then enables us to better plan, to be in a better position to be positive, and to be better engaged and maintain that sense of purpose that we need as we live through our later life. I did want to touch on some thoughts in regards to the COVID-19 circumstances. Obviously, it's been front of mind for all of us over the last few weeks and has impacted on all of us in different ways. And certainly those in the older age bracket have been rightly identified as in high risk categories. And that's led to certain restrictions for a lot of people in terms of who they can connect with, things that they can do. So I just wanted to touch on a few aspects in relation to the COVID-19 circumstances and offer some advice about those. And I'll just go to some slides again in relation to those. Bear with me. So the first one is recognising the direct and indirect risk associated with the COVID-19 situation. Now, the direct risks obviously are contracting the virus itself, but also an impact on other health circumstances that we might be managing at this point in our life. And we may have been a bit compromised in terms of accessing the normal support or medical advice about those conditions and those circumstances. We might be enduring different conditions because we haven't been able to pursue the surgery that we may have been going to undertake, a whole range of different circumstances which have directly impacted on our health and well-being. But there's also the indirect risks which really talk to the flow-on effects of being disconnected or being cut off. So that risk of isolation is a very real one through the COVID-19 situation. Most of us aren't able to interact with people as we normally would. We're certainly not having the personal contact with people, the physical contact with people. We may have been cut off from certain activities we normally would do, like coming to library events or going to our volunteer activities or going to our workplaces. So there's those indirect risks or indirect effects of the coronavirus situation that, again, can impact on our health and well-being if we're not thinking about them and working around them. And my thoughts in regards to these circumstances that the three key elements to our successful ageing, positivity, planning and purpose absolutely still apply in this situation, perhaps even more so. So it's really an extension to those key ingredients to some further points around thinking about how we can be acting in a preventative way, in a precautionary way. So that obviously is something we need to be planning for and acting on where necessary. And it's adhering to the regulations and the advice that's been coming out. It's about being smart in terms of what we do and how we do them. It's about being creative where we need to be, so that accessing necessary supplies and resources we can do in different ways, either through the help of others, through technology platforms, etc. The second one is about keeping perspective. And I think this is a good one that I've actually certainly learned from older people I've been speaking with over the last few weeks, that it's understanding that this situation will pass. Yes, there may be changes after the COVID-19 situation, but the current circumstances will pass and we'll move through them. So it's ensuring we don't get too overwhelmed by the thought of the current circumstances and projecting too far ahead in terms of what other consequences or what outcomes might happen locally for us here in Australia, excuse me. So again, keeping perspective, which people with the experience and the knowledge and the wisdom of the past, I know have been sharing with others. So perhaps you have been doing that yourself. The third one is staying connected, which obviously comes back to that point about engagement and living with purpose. So staying connected, the ways in which we do that, obviously we need to be perhaps a bit more creative with in these current circumstances. And I know people have been doing that. And again, our discussion this afternoon is a good example of that, we couldn't come together face to face. So we've done that in different ways. It's also about pursuing activities that will help nurture our physical and mental well-being in different ways. So it's being open to doing those things in different ways, and whether it's taking advice about that or trying new things and trying different things, seeing what works for us, seeing what we like. But it's really underpinned by that aim to stay connected. So there may well be questions or other thoughts about the COVID-19 situation that we can get to during our Q&A section. So as Angie mentioned at the start of our discussion, I did write a book called Booming, which was really done for two reasons. The first of which, that I believe as individuals, we have this great opportunity to really seize our later life and pursue a really positive, successful aging journey. And secondly, that I believe we have a collective responsibility to help frame aging in a much more positive sense than what it's been done to this point, and to help address the negativity, the ageism that surrounds older people, the way they're viewed, and the way aging is viewed more broadly. And I've really shared the learnings that I've had through the last 25 or so years from observing people, working with people, seeing people around the world and how things have been done around the world insofar as aging, and how people have aged successfully, and how people have done different things. I've had the benefit of learning from those people, and hopefully through the book, I've been able to share those learnings with other people, and that can help fuel their positive aging journey, their successful aging journey, and enable more and more people to boom, given most of us will have this increased longevity. I wanted to wrap up the presentation side of the discussion this afternoon with a quote that has resonated with myself over the last couple of years. And we often talk about happiness when it comes to later life and life in general. And I think happiness is very difficult to define. But I came across this definition a little while ago, and as I said, it really resonated with me in terms of our aging journey and the ability for us to boom. And this quote is, "Happiness is the joy one feels in the pursuit of their own potential." Happiness is the joy one feels in the pursuit of their own potential. As I said, that quote very much resonated with me and the work that I've been doing over the last number of years, and the people I've met and the people I've seen age so successfully. So hopefully it may be of some meaning to you as well. And again, I thank you for participating in our discussion this afternoon. Look forward to your questions over the next period of time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Marcus. Let's give him a round of applause from our iPads and computers. They're so informative. And those polls were really interesting. I wonder if we can actually get that last snapshot that came up for our magical fairies behind the scenes at the library. There we go. Do you know what gives you purpose? 38% said that they absolutely do. 50% yes, but hard to maintain sometimes, and 12% not really. I love that most people feel they have purpose. I think that's fantastic, Marcus.
Yeah, absolutely, Angie. And I think the variety of responses is a true reflection that we're all going to be at different stages at different points in our life. And there might be stages where we feel absolutely tuned into who we are. We feel in control. We've got this great sense of positivity, and that's fantastic. At other times, we might come in and out of that and feel on top of it today, not so much tomorrow, and bounce around a little bit. And other times we feel like it's just well out of our reach and quite a distant thought. So I think that does reflect the reality for most of us, that we're going to be at different points. But it is, as you said, it is great that a number of people in our discussion this afternoon have got that sense of purpose. And so the challenge for us then, when we have that sense of purpose, is obviously how do we maintain that? And again, I think it talks to the importance of that self-reflection to understand why we might be feeling that sense of purpose. So it's understanding the things we have been doing and are doing, and then as we evolve into the future, how do we retain them, or how do we keep doing them, knowing that there might be points in time where we have to look at doing things differently. Again, our circumstances might change. So how do we keep doing those things in a different way so that we continue to fuel that sense of purpose and that sense of engagement?
Yeah. And don't you think sometimes it's a matter of taking that time out to just sit and ask yourself, what gives me that little spark of joy? Because sometimes we can get very busy with things and not take the time to sit and just ponder, where are we getting that spark of joy from?
Yeah. That is so true, and it is about investing the time. And the time doesn't always have to be a huge amount of time. It could be just taking time out, in the moment to let something really wash over us and sink in. But it also is about generally making time to really have that reflection, to really consider things that we're really enjoying at the moment, things that are making us feel in different ways, and then understanding how we can continue to tap into those. And conversely, understanding when things aren't making us feel good, and why is that? Is it an environment that we're spending time in that isn't good for us, relationships? And I think there's something for us to note in regards to relationships and their impact on us, that often people talk about having lots of relationships, and the more people, more friendships, and the more relationships, the better. But it's actually about the quality of those relationships that is better determinant in terms of their impact on our health and well-being and our sense of positivity. So when we think about where we're at the moment, we think about the future, it's looking at what are those relationships I really want to keep nurturing, because they are really a great source of positivity for me.
Yes, the people that when you walk away, you feel uplifted, and then others, maybe you feel a little deflated when they leave. So it's good to watch out for. It
is. And it's also looking at other relationships that I want to restore that maybe have just fractured a little bit over time, whether it's through geographic distance or perhaps a misunderstanding sometime in the past. It's understanding that there will be those relationships that we will benefit from investing some time in restoring and nurturing, because we know that they'll have a positive impact on the way I feel.
Absolutely. Now, we've had a couple of questions come through. One was from Russ Elwin. Late last year, I had a near-death experience, and at the time, because of the acute pain, would have welcomed death. I also have chronic pain and am mobility limited, and consequently, during COVID-19, find it easy to stop home. I can't see a lot of value in positivity, as I generally think practitioners are unrealistic at best, and in the case of idiots like Trump, charlatans. How do you convince a curmudgeon like me any differently? That's a juicy question for you, Marcus.
It is. Thanks very much, Russ, for sharing that, and totally understand or appreciate your thinking. My thoughts about that, about your question, Russ, is really small steps are good ones. And first of all, starting with developing a belief that you can, if you want to, change your mindset, change your view on life. And that's not to think that it's going to happen suddenly overnight, but it is about engaging in a daily process to start generating that more positive outlook, and also generating that self-belief. And without trying to be too scientific about things, there's been a lot of learning in the last few years about neuroplasticity, which is obviously retraining our brain and the growth of our brain and our mindset. And I think we need to be really mindful of that as we do get older, because it should be encouraging for us that, yes, we can develop our thinking, we can change our attitudes, and it's something we should be taking confidence in. So Russ, I would say back yourself, that you can develop an ability to be more positive if you want to. And also, I'll just reiterate the point from earlier in the presentation that successful aging is yours. So you define it for yourself, mate, in terms of what you want and how you want to be living your life. And it's not for me or others to prescribe that for you. You define it for yourself, and then you pursue it. And people like Trump or anyone else can't get in the way of that. So be confident in yourself and look at taking those small steps would be my thoughts.
I'd love to say something too, Marcus. I feel like every person, I mean, I'm 45 now, but I love how you're getting me thinking ahead. I just would love people who are older than me to realize how much they have to give in terms of mentoring younger people. They've got this whole life experience, and they potentially take it for granted, all the knowledge they've accumulated. So I would love to say to people older than myself, share that knowledge as much as you can. If you've got someone younger than you that's hanging around, that we want to know what you know already through those decades of living.
And I think the current circumstances, Angie, are just a great prompt for that. The younger generations haven't really had to endure serious circumstances like we're in at the moment, and past generations have certainly endured and had to adapt in the past, whether it's through war periods or depressions and significant other events that have demonstrated an adaptability. And so there is that knowledge to share. I must admit, I benefited yesterday from talking to a couple of older chaps because there's been a lot of discussion about homeschooling and whether kids need to get back to school and all these sorts of things. And these two gentlemen shared with me that in December 1941, when the Japanese army bombed Pearl Harbor, and they had to stop, all school was stopped here, and they then had to go into early Christmas holidays, and the first 6 weeks of the next school year were cancelled. And they said it didn't do us any harm, and then we'd wait for the schoolwork to come in the mail and by correspondence, and we'd sit at the kitchen table, and then he couldn't go back to school until the school had their trenches dug. Now, I just walked away from that conversation with a much better perspective about all these stresses families have at the moment in terms of, maintaining their kids schooling at home and getting certain things done. So you're absolutely right. There's this great depth of knowledge and wisdom to be shared. And I think from a younger person's perspective, it's being open and seeking that sort of engagement to get the benefit.
Awesome. We've got a question from Marion Ivamy Bellarosa. I hope I've said that right. Hi, Marion. Does your book touch on services you may need to tap into as you do age?
Thanks very much, Marion, for that question. Yes. So part of at least one chapter in Booming does talk about where you may need support services or different accommodation or indeed aged care, depending on your circumstances as you get older. And again, the big message about that is to be planning for the future. So I know none of us really want to contemplate the fact that we might need aged care later in life or even contemplating end of life, but there's just such great value in thinking about it, and even some scenario-based planning that if I need such and such, where do I want to be? Who do I want to get it from? And then if it is needed at a later point, your family or loved ones are better informed about what your preferences are, your choices are maximised. The problem that so often occurs in the need for aged care is that people don't act until it's crisis time. And unfortunately, in that situation, we often have very limited choice. We have to make a very rushed decision, and obviously it's a very stressful time. So we get a compromised outcome. Obviously, in that regard, we have, as I said before, much less control over what's happening, and inevitably might be decisions are made for us. So yes, Booming does address that to an extent, and again, the message is about planning, considering the options, and having the conversations that are understandably difficult for us. And similarly in regards to end of life, again, not many of us want to contemplate a conversation about that stage of our lives, but it's just so valuable if we can. Again, it's never too early to do that, but having those conversations means if and when that time does come, it takes so much stress off the family. It can be much more peaceful for yourself and those around you, because that communication's happened at an earlier time, and things then can be followed in accordance with your preferences.
Now, Moira Donovan has just a quick, easy one for you, Marcus. What was the last word in the happiness quote, please?
The happiness quote, the last word was...
now you're putting on...
Potential.
Potential. What was the whole quote?
Happiness is the joy one feels in the pursuit of their own potential.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Did you come up with that?
No, I came across it about 2.5 years ago, and it really resonated with me straight away.
I love it. Yeah. Now, Alison Lewis Nicholson has written, I'm just trying to work this one out a little bit. Do you think the punctuation that this virus has provided will, it's jumped around on me. Do you think the punctuation that this virus has provided will mean that many of us may, I think it might be, not want to re-engage as much as before? Is that what you think it might be, Marcus?
I'll just get it up now. I think that's a very interesting question, Alison, and I don't know if there's a definite answer. I think some people will be absolutely craving that reconnection as soon as it's possible. I think others maybe will develop some or maintain behaviours that have been developed through the COVID situation. And I guess also it depends a little bit on how the regulations are eased. And we obviously expect there will be a gradual release of the restrictions. So that might see people incrementally getting back to the way they normally behave, the way they normally interacted. I think certainly when it comes to older people, and I can speak for my own family in this regard, that not having that frequent contact, and certainly my children having that contact with their grandparents, all parties are really missing that. So once we can get back to that sort of normal interactions, that absolutely we'll be pursuing that. And I think many people will be. I think there's some interesting considerations about workplaces and the way other environments are traditionally operating, whether they look at doing things differently, given what they've learned through the COVID situation. You might see more people working from home, and some businesses thinking, well, we don't need as much office space as what we've had in the past. There's some savings for us here. So I think there will be some changes, but I think in terms of the personal interactions, that people will be wanting to get back to the way they normally interact and connecting. I guess one of the things that might be extended is that people using technology to connect if they are living far apart. So that might be something which is much more common than what it has been in the past, I would suggest.
Yeah. I've got a great question here from Jake Lenders. I'd like to know the answer to this as well. How can we support loved ones who tend to adopt a highly negative outlook about their aging journey? Unfortunately, my mum is exceedingly negative about her prospects in life ahead for her. I hear all the time from her that I'm too old to blah, blah, blah.
Jake, a great question and a common challenge, particularly for those who are playing a role in their family with older family members, and it can be really hard. Again, similar to the advice to Russ earlier, it's about small steps, and it's identifying things that your family member do like and do enjoy, and just tapping into those, even if they are things from the past that you know they were a part of, whether it was a connection with music or a connection with a different pursuit that you can somehow bring into the current lifestyle. And again, it's looking at, without being sneaky or deceptive, but it can be something that you do subtly rather than the big overt sort of, let's make a change, let's do this grand new thing. It's just a way of considering how you can bring it in a sort of organic type way, and it'd be surprised sometimes where those connections come from. It often might be someone who isn't as directly involved with that older family member. It might be a neighbour, it might be someone, a community group, or it might be a different method of connecting in with that passion. I know with an older family member of mine who was very much into to painting and artwork for a number of years, but got cut off from that when her teacher was no longer doing the class, etc. And then 18 months later, we introduced an online option, which then fueled that passion, and over time, the person reconnected with that pursuit of theirs. And so again, it's really investing that time to understand what's been important in the life of that family member. Is it something to link back with their career? Is it a family connection? Did they used to travel, and it's something which could be reconnecting with that? And I can give you an example of if you don't mind, Angela, a quick story. An older gentleman who moved into an aged care facility I'm involved with, and he basically lived a life as a nomad, he and his brother and mother, through the Queensland bush, looking for shelter each time. And so you can imagine in his later life being brought into a care home, as nice as it is, but a relatively small room in a closed environment. And he was terribly frustrated, and it really impacted on his mental health. And what he did enjoy doing was regaling staff and other residents with these stories of the places he travelled to and the experiences he had in the bush. And they then worked with him to put those stories into a book. Now, the gentleman happened to be illiterate, and that could have been a barrier where you say, well, it just can't happen. But it just takes the enthusiasm from some people to ignite that connection. And then this gentleman was absolutely transformed in terms of his outlook on life. And it was just connecting him back with his passion, with his life in the past and his family.
That is so good. And as you say that, it makes me just think, we've got so much access to easy technology now. If you've got someone who is that elderly in your life, film them on your phone, get as much out of them as you can, because the wisdom is all there, and that history that you'll want to share for generations. Yeah. So it's great to capture.
Absolutely. And it's never underestimate the small things. I think there's so much can be gained from what might seem a small connection or a small thing, but it might mean a lot to someone.
Absolutely. We've got another one from Rochelle Smith. What advice do you have for helping older people in particular, e.g. elderly parents, grandparents, cope with the current isolation situation? You have touched on that.
So again, it's challenging, and it will depend on the circumstances of whether you can get to them physically yourself or not. But certainly creating ways where they can be communicating. And again, I'll give an example of my own parents who are in their mid-80s, and normally Easter weekend is a raft of family celebrations now, 30 odd people coming together of all ages. And mum and dad weren't on any social media platforms or any of those sort of things. And before that Easter weekend, I was able to visit them and connected mum with House Party of all things and Facebook. And so that weekend she was, having this real-time interaction with the grandkids aged between 8 and 30, relatives in New South Wales. And so that was one example. Certainly the regular check-ins, whether that's via phone, whether that's, and I think creating points of interest away from the COVID situation, whether it's particular interests or other things happening in people's lives, it can be part of the focus as opposed to coronavirus, which can run the risk of being overwhelmed. And again, taking the initiative to be positive. Yes, we've got this dreadful situation at the moment. It will pass. So it's really taking the cues where you can see them to be driving that connection, to be bringing in things that aren't COVID related, and maintaining that sense of positivity.
Yep. And there's, as we say, there's so much technology, all those series that you can power through, those comedy shows to lift the spirits. And there's one show that I haven't seen yet that I'm dying to. You've probably seen it, Marcus, because it relates to this topic. It's on ABC iView, which is all free, Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. Have you watched that? It's meant to be amazing.
Yeah, I've had some experience with those sort of programs, Angie, and it is wonderful. And I think my only caveat with those sort of initiatives is it's got to be of substance. And that program did highlight one that had that genuine feel to it. It's got to be about genuine relationships being formed and people interacting in a really meaningful way. I think too, you mentioned, the catching up on TV shows or whatever it might be, online. That becomes important conversations with people too. That, Mum, did you watch, what episode are you up to on such and such show? Or because they're the things you normally be chatting about over a cup of tea anyway. So it normalises some of those things and creates those shared points of interest as opposed to people feeling as though they're separated and disconnected.
Absolutely. Now, just as we wind up shortly, I just want to ask you, Marcus, as an expert yourself on ageing, how are you preparing for your future?
I must admit, I do plan, and I have taken steps over the last couple of years to better manage my physical and mental health. And I actually think I'm a healthier person and a more positive person now than I was probably 10 years ago. Not to say you don't have your lapses and your challenges, I certainly do. But yeah, I certainly do think about the future. And I do try and improve my understanding of what's important to me and prioritising my time. And I think I've got better at that over the last couple of years as well. I'm an ex-rugby player, so I've got a few sore joints and a few funny knees and things like that. So I'm conscious I need to be doing more in terms of flexibility and stretching and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it is about contemplating the future and hopefully being excited about it, Angie, and thinking that there's lots to achieve and lots to enjoy. And my wife and I often talk about different experiences or adventures we want to pursue, whether it's traveling or doing certain things. And yeah, so I try and be adhering to my advice as much as possible.
Fantastic. Well, obviously everyone's going to want to read your book now, Marcus. So it is going to be available at the library when the library reopens, which is hopefully very soon. So if you don't get to the library, you can also order it online, and lots of bookstores are now selling it around the country, and they're charging either free, it's either free postage or reduced rates for the postage. Anything else, Marcus, that we need to know about before we wind up?
No, I think that covers it all. I just really appreciate everyone participating and being a part of the conversation this afternoon. And thanks for those who've sent some messages on the the chat line then in appreciation, and I really enjoyed people's questions and poll responses. And Angie, thank you so much for steering the conversation. It's been great to be a part of it with you and everyone who's online.
It's so nice to be able to meet someone on the other side of the country, isn't it? And feel like you really get to know them, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, really enjoyed it.
And just upcoming events for the Geelong Regional Libraries, they're going to be presenting a wide range of online events for all ages. This week they've launched their Pearl Jam Digital Yarn and Digital Armchair Actor sessions. And next week the library is launching Conversation Club in Russian, Book Chat and Visible Mending, just to name a few. And if you'd love to keep up to date with all their programs, make sure you visit grlc.vic.gov.au and be sure to follow the library on Facebook. So on behalf of the library, thank you all for joining us today, and we really look forward to seeing you all again shortly. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Angie. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks to the team behind the scenes.
Indeed.
Have a great day, everybody.
See you. Goodbye.